meet the Mets. Meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town. Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet the Mets! Oh, they're hollering and cheering and they're jumping in their seats. Where do they go? To meet the Mets! All the fans are true to the orange and blue, so hurry up and come on down, 'cause we got ourselves a ball club, the Mets of New York town. Give 'em a yell! Give 'em a hand! And let 'em know you're rooting in the stand. The Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town, of New York town.
And we are live, Mets and baseball fans. Shout out to everybody for first chiming in the live stream, or if you're watching this on replay, thank you guys so much for being here. We have a lot to get into today. Unfortunately, some news regarding Javy Baez, that he's no longer a New York Met. So I'm going to deep dive my initial reaction to all this, how I'm feeling about it, who's really at fault here. Was this the right move? Was this the wrong move? What are all the reasons that we could come up with to this point as to why Baez is no longer on the Mets? And really, what is next for the Mets now? How are they going to go about their infield, their roster configuration overall at second base, potentially even at third base? So that's what we will be deep diving in today's live stream for however long we go. So again, shout out to everybody that's first chiming in. Really, really appreciate you guys. Like I said, we do have a lot to get into, and it wouldn't surprise me if we end up doing 2 live streams a day, because there is a lot going on in the baseball world that maybe we'll see some stuff this evening. But for now, this stream is solely focused on Javy Baez and what is next for the Mets, addressing their infield and really their overall roster. But again, folks, to everyone first chiming in, thank you so much for being here. I saw a donation. I don't know who donated. It's not showing me. So if someone is in the chat and did donate, please let me know if that was you, and that way I can recognize what the donation was. Thank you so much in advance for that. It really does mean a lot. I see Tremont and Sandy, great member on the channel. Japri, Mets Productions, great member. Stephanie, great member as well. Marco, how's it going? TC, Jason, Tremont, Anthony, Sir Anthony, Alan, Mark Pierce, John, Noah's Navigating New York, the Baseball Fanatic, AJ, Anthony, Michael, Jason, James, Vin, all you guys, Freddie, Tremont, Gerald, I think, was in here as well. Great member on the channel. Anthony, Danny, Eli, Brennan, thank you all so much, everyone that's first chiming in, folks. Really, really appreciate you all. Like I said, I'll get to more recognizing everyone and answering all the comments as we go throughout the live stream. So as I said, there is a lot that needs to be gained into here. Darren, my man, great member and great friend all the way from the UK. I know you're gutted about Baez. And look, I'm upset to see Baez go too, but at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination. So like I said, we're going to get into everything there is to know on the Baez front and why this happened. Could this have been avoided? Was this the best route for the Mets? Was this the best route for Baez, respectively? We do have a donation in here from Web Love, so I'd like to address this quick, and then we'll get into everything on our list on the graphic here in a second. Thank you so much for the $5 donation, Web Loves. Hype in the chat for my man. Happy Mets didn't overpay for Baez. Truly believe Mets and A's will be trade partners. Predicting Chapman and Manaea becomes Mets. Escobar can play second. Okay. That's something that definitely could be feasible for sure. Thank you so much for the donation, my man. Again, we'll be getting into more on potential trade options for the Mets and really what's next for them. Again, shout out everybody in the chat, though. Really, really appreciate every single one of you guys that's first coming in. Thank you so much for the continued support. Help us get to 200 likes for the first short-term goal in the stream. You guys know the drill by now. But let's get into this one. Like I said, we got a lot to unfold on this front. And again, I'm someone that, as you guys were just watching the live stream last night, we went around 3 hours. I was heavily optimistic on the Baez front, and I was not proven wrong in the sense of it's kind of crazy how and this is obviously because of Billy Epper becoming GM and how his viewpoint is different than maybe what initially Sandy had in mind, or maybe initially what Zach Scott had in mind, because there's no doubting that if Billy Epper wasn't the GM for the Mets, the Mets wouldn't have had everything transpire the way it has this offseason. Going into the offseason, we were all under the impression, most of us were, that guys like Javy Baez, Noah Syndergaard, and Aaron Loop were the most likely to return. And all of them are gone. And the reasons for that vary for sure, but it goes to show you that, as what happened last offseason too, with the Mets being connected to all these different people, that, nothing's guaranteed, nothing is certain. So even when it comes to players wanting to come back, voicing their opinions on wanting to come back and all these things, let's keep it in mind that truly nothing is certain. So I just want to really reiterate that, because it's easy for myself to fall in that trap a little bit, especially when you're excited and you want a player to return. Because as you guys know, I was a very heavy Javy Baez advocate to return to the New York Mets. And I do believe I understand why the Mets did not bring him back, that we will be getting into shortly. But no less, I would have loved to see him in that infield with Lindor. I really think that they would have killed it, especially defensively. Love that relationship, but clearly the Mets have different intentions, and I'm going to trust the route that they're going down, because so far, so fantastic this offseason. They've absolutely been killing it with Marte, Canna, Escobar, and now getting themselves Mad Max Scherzer that we got on the wall behind me. If you guys don't know, Javy Baez used to be in that spot for the newspaper, and now it is Mad Max. So out with the old, in with the new. But as I said, Javy Baez, I wish him nothing but the best with the Tigers. No ill will against the guy at all. It really feels like a fever dream that he was even a Met. And I will say that in reality, if you look at what Baez did with the Mets, that was awesome. But obviously the attachment wouldn't be the way it is right now if we didn't trade for him. If Baez was never a trade target and the Mets never landed him and he was just a free agent right now, I don't think anyone is talking about Javy Baez coming to the Mets outside of just his personal connection with Lindor. So obviously how he did in his short time in Queens really turned the page on a lot of people's viewpoint on him, including myself. And again, I wish him nothing but success going forward with the Tigers. He's going to be a great fit there. But now I really want to get into shortly why exactly this transpired, right? Why did the Mets decide to let Baez walk? Why did Baez decide to potentially go to the Tigers? From all the information that we can squander and come up with to this point, that's what I really want to address here. So again, folks, everyone that's first chiming in the live stream, thank you so much for being here. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe. And as always, help us get a 12K subs for the next short-term goal if you enjoy this kind of Mets content, and also help us get to 200 likes for the first short-term goal here in the stream. But folks, everybody in the chat right now, to my roughly 500 viewers, let me know if you are happy, sad about Javy Baez no longer being a New York Met. I want to know what is everyone's initial gut reaction to this news. Please make sure to let me know in the stream, so that way I can kind of get the feel of the audience I'm working with right now. And again, shout out everybody as well. Appreciate all the shout outs and the kind words, guys, as always. Sad. Yeah, I think we're going to see some happy. I think we're going to see a bunch of sad. That's what I'm assuming right now. Happy. Okay. Garden Chaos says happy. Sad. Yeah, again, folks, just continue to let me know your thoughts right now in the stream as we're happening live on if you're happy, upset about the Mets parting ways with Javy Baez. Optimistic, says Stephanie. That's the best answer. That is the absolute best answer. Love that. Hurt, upset, let down. Okay. I'm okay. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Well, awesome. Again, continue. Let me know your thoughts in the chat. I love to see that. I'm going to address them as much as I can. Look at what I commented on your tweet. The first one you posted about Baez. I'll try to do that at some point throughout the live stream, my man. But okay. So again, my initial reaction, we saw the reports that came out last night in last night's live stream about Baez. And I would also just like to give a shout out to, Jack Ramsey and, others that, I was kind of diminishing saying, because look, Jack hasn't been right about a lot of things, but he was accurate about Baez last night. Even if he was just putting 2 and 2 together, which I don't think takes a rocket scientist to do, I would just like to apologize to him for really saying that, I think I came off a little strong saying that, there's no shot that what he's saying is accurate, because it obviously was in the end. So I just want to man up and say that first and foremost, even though that I know that he hasn't been consistent with his reporting. I do think it was easy to pinpoint because he said it right after the Tim Healy tweet about the Mets probably not doing anything else position player-wise. But reports that originally came out after the Javy Baez deal through Andy Martino. And again, Andy has been on top of a lot this offseason. So regardless on how we feel about the guy personally, I think we're all under the agreement that Andy actually has been pretty spot on with his reporting this offseason. So I give kudos to Andy, not talking about him on a personal level or anything like that, but he has been gaining a lot of info to us that a lot of other people haven't. And especially breaking the Max Scherzer news, that's quite the rebound. So I will, of course, tip of the cap whenever it is in fact needed. But Andy did report today after Baez parting ways with the Mets that the Mets, a couple things to keep in mind. What he has heard through his sources were that the Mets did give an offer to him early on, as we expected. Because remember, guys, going back to right as the offseason began, it looked like the Mets were going to bring back Javy Baez. Sandy Alderson spoke nothing short of glowingly about the guy. Steve Cohen was speaking amazing things about him as well. It seemed like they really wanted him back, but they gave an offer to him early. And according to those reports, it was right around $125 million. And Baez ends up taking $15 million more on a 6-year deal to go to the Detroit Tigers, a team that's in desperate need, looking for a shortstop. And it doesn't look like they're going to get Carlos Correa now. And that's what I said in last night's live stream. I said that Correa, it's hard to see him going anywhere else than the Tigers. But again, they have a reluctance to want to actually give in and throw $300+ million at a player like Correa. So I don't think Correa is going to the Tigers at this point. I think Baez is their guy for sure at shortstop. So now when it comes to, okay, why did this transpire the way it did? I'm going to get into that further here in a second because there are a lot of reasons as to why I believe the Mets parted ways with Baez and also potentially why Baez left the Mets. I think that both sides would have liked to reunite, but naturally there was a falling out, and these things, of course, happen in baseball. And again, it's not an end-all situation for the Mets by any means. Personally, I just would have loved to see them together. So again, keep that in mind. That's just my standpoint, but I'm by no means am I going to turn against the Mets or, be like, oh, this was a terrible move or anything like that. They've had an amazing offseason. I have my trust in them with the moves that they are doing going forward, and so should you guys right now. But again, thank you so much for the support and the donations, guys. I'm going to address the donations now. Luis with the $5 donation. Thank you so much, my man. And Mets signed Carlos Rodon, it would definitely soften the loss of Javy Baez. Oh, of course it would. I mean, if the Mets do anything significant, especially potentially today, before the lockout, yeah, of course. The easiest way to cope with losing something is about gaining something, maybe similar level, if not better, right? I think that's how a lot of people felt about, the Marte, the Canna, the Escobar, and then someone like Max Scherzer after originally losing Noah Syndergaard, Aaron Loop, went from being doom and gloom to, happy, joyful, and knowing that this is a team on the right path to success. So I agree with you on that one for sure. Luis, thank you so much for the donation, my man. Let's see, Omir, or is it Omir or Omar? I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, my man. Thank you so much for the donation, though. I mean, the membership. Everyone, hype in the chat to my man for the membership on WardyNYM. Thank you so much. Really, really happy to have you part of the community as well. And Sandy with the $2 donation, keeping black jersey, but I said buy as the Tigers. Oh, yeah, that's right. I know that you did order your black jersey. Again, I don't know ill will to Javy Baez. He did what he did. He did what he thought was best for himself, his family, and at the end of the day, if that means going to the Tigers, then that means going to the Tigers. Again, all power to him. He did nothing during his time with the Mets tenure to make me, say that, oh, he backstabbed us or anything like that. No, he had an interest in coming back. The Mets had interest in bringing him back, but they couldn't reach the right agreement that made sense for both sides. And that is something that very often happens in baseball. We know that, especially with the Mets. Again, thank you for the donation, Sandy. I really appreciate that. King Snow, I'm only mad about losing so far as Loop since we need bullpen help. That one more starting pitcher is what we should focus on. Yes, and they are focusing on that. I understand your frustrations with Loop a little bit. The Mets need to make sure that they replace him, absolutely. So until they do that, people are going to naturally be like, okay, a little bit of a head scratcher here. We just lost a reliever with a sub-1 ERA in 2021. I get that. I'm confident that they will replace him and do just fine on that front. But again, actions speak louder than words always, right? Appreciate the donations, King Snow. Everyone hype in the chat for King Snow as well. There's a John Heyman. Is there a new John Heyman tweet? Is that what everybody's saying? I know that Heyman tweeted recently about the Mets that we'll be getting into shortly, unless he tweets something new. So I'm going to look at this quick, and then we'll get into more on what's all transpiring. Oh, okay. John Heyman just tweeted the following. If you guys are watching this live, at least on replay, you probably saw it already. There are no press conferences and lockouts, so Mets could hold a 4-man Zoom tomorrow with Scherzer, Marte, Canna, and Escobar, and potentially someone else if they sign anyone else today. So that would actually be pretty sick. I think that would probably be the most insane presser that anyone could see, to have all the signings happen at once as a press. That would be pretty damn cool. I would like that a bit. And that way everyone can kind of get familiar with each other a little bit outside of what they know in baseball, between Scherzer, Marte, Canna, and Escobar. Very, very cool. I'm not against that. I mean, again, I think it's stupid that you can't do press conferences during the lockout, though. I mean, I don't really understand that rationale, but again, I'm not the one that is in charge of the CBA. I don't know all the little details. So, don't think I'm an expert on that front, because by no means am I. I'm just a fan like you guys, trying to do my best to keep up to date with everything. But now I want to get into, okay, so Jon Heyman did tweet earlier regarding the New York Mets that, let's see here. He did say earlier that the Mets are still active, looking for another starting pitcher and a bat. I'm going to go on the lengths of assuming it's going to be a significant bat, because depth moves are something that is not hard for the Mets to do, obviously. So the Mets are looking for another position player, and they're looking for another starting pitcher. We'll probably address that more so throughout this live stream, but also tonight's live stream if we go again live this evening. Because again, I do believe that things are going to happen with the Mets today regarding it being the tender deadline. In case you guys don't know, today by 8 p.m. Eastern time, teams have to get in contracts. They have to either tender a contract to teams to their players, or they have to non-tender. And there's some potential non-tender candidates for the Mets that might come off a little surprising. And there's others that obviously they need to make sure that they do in fact tender, like all the core pieces and Pete Alonso's, the Jeff McNeil's, everyone, stuff like that. So we'll be getting into that in a second. Christopher, thank you so much for the $2 donation. Detroit not winning a World Series anytime soon. No, they're not, but they need a shortstop. Again, they're a team on the rise. Detroit's in a very good position. They have great young starting pitching talent, and they have a really strong prospect pool overall. Detroit is only going to continue to get better. So by no means do I think this is a bad pickup on their end. It's unfortunate that the Mets lost Baez, but now let's get into the fact of why they lost Baez, right? So Chris, thank you so much for the donation, my man. But guys, okay, as you see here, we have a couple bullet points. Like I said, the Mets offered around $125 million, according to Andy Martino, assuming that that is in fact factual. It really feels obvious that the Mets never felt strongly about going long-term with Javy Baez. If I had to assume, the Mets probably wanted between 3-4 year deal, maybe pushing 5. I don't think the Mets want to go 6 years with Javy Baez. And I can understand why they wouldn't want to go down that route, essentially because they're in a win now stage right now. They're focusing on more so kind of shorter term deals. They might go long term, especially if they go for a guy like Chris Bryant. I don't see how you get KB short term. I think that would be really impressive if they could, but I don't see that happening, right? But for Baez, what he brings to the team right now, I understand why they didn't want to go long term for him. You want to hope that he obviously continues to put up production like he did during his stint with the Mets, which was awesome. Now I'm going to get into more of his numbers shortly, because I want us to appreciate just how good Javy Baez was in his stint with the Mets. Again, it really like a fever dream. It almost feels like Yoenis Cespedes in a way, because outside of the following season in 2016, Yoenis Cespedes didn't do anything for the Mets. So it was really kind of like, just a year or so of Cespedes, which was short term. And same thing kind of with Baez, but even shorter than that. But I want to recognize Baez because he did a great job with the Mets while he was here. But the point I'm trying to make is the Mets clearly have a vision right now, and Javy Baez was not a priority in them. And whether or not that is something that is more driven by Billy Epler is yet to be seen, but you'd have to imagine that this goes directly in hand with Billy Epler becoming GM. Because if Sandy Alderson was, in fact, still in position right now as controlling baseball operations, say the Mets didn't have a hire yet, right? The guy was, literally jumping for joy. I never saw Sandy Alderson gas a player up as much as he did Javy Baez at those winter meetings. He was the only player that he really was adamant about bringing back. And Steve Cohen was very adamant as well. Steve Cohen had a dinner with Javy Baez at his house, just like Noah Syndergaard and everyone else after the season. Everything went well. And Baez made it known that he would like to, return the Mets. And he said that going into free agency before he got traded to the Mets, that he would like to go to the Mets and potentially play second base alongside Francisco Lindor. But things change. And Billy Epler, if you guys have noticed a trend right now, has emphasized on-base percentage. He has emphasized guys with great plate discipline. And I know Eduardo Escobar is someone that does not have, insane walk rates. He doesn't get on base like a crazy amount. He's actually very similar to Javy Baez, especially offensive production. They're neck and neck. The only drastic difference is their defense. Javy Baez is a Gold Glove. Eduardo Escobar is not. But no, by no means is Eduardo Escobar, a constant liability like a J.D. Davis or something along those lines. He can get the job just fine, but he's nothing stellar in the field is the point I'm trying to make. But Baez is someone who, if you look at what Epler is looking for right now, you see the Starling Martes, you see the Marcanas, on-base machines. Guys are constantly putting the ball in play, right? If that is more the vision that the Mets are trying to go down, what all the moves have been really this point to indicate outside of Escobar. Because again, Escobar, a home run machine, a guy that will get you, of course, versatility at third base and second base, but also someone that got you on a bargain of a contract. It would have been foolish for the Mets not to take Escobar on that deal, knowing that you can have him as a starter, or if you get deep enough where he's an ultra utility guy, you can do that as well. But the Mets clearly have a vision, as I said, focusing with on base and getting balls in play. If that is truly the route that they're emphasizing, it makes more sense than not as to why they're not prioritizing Javy Baez here and wanting Javy Baez on a shorter term deal. And Baez went for 6 years, $140 million. So it really doesn't feel like this was about the money. The Mets obviously have money that they're working with, even after throwing the amount of money that they just did in Max Scherzer. That's short-term money we're talking about. The Mets have dollars. We all know this. So I don't think this was a factor of really them being just 15 mil apart, but rather the term on this one. Again, I don't know if we're going to we may have further reports that indicate how far the Mets go out in regards to the term that they offered potentially to Baez. Maybe they would have gone 6 years, but everything right now from all we're seeing is an indication that no, the Mets did not want to go long term with Javy Baez. They have their respective reasons, as does Javy Baez have his respective reasoning to part ways with the Mets and to go and be potentially, the number one shortstop now in Detroit. And that could have been a factor as well. Javy's always been a shortstop. Again, the only way he would stay at second base is with the Mets. But maybe that was also something that was a calling for him in Detroit too. Maybe that after doing second base with Lindor, he had a little bit up in the air feeling on if he wanted to stay at the position or if he wants to be that go-to guy in the infield. He will be that at shortstop for Detroit for the years to come. I do want to address a couple donations though before we go any further, folks. Again, thank you so much everyone that's been chiming in. Really, really appreciate you guys. Make sure you smash that like and subscribe button. Help us get to 500 likes for the next short-term goal in the stream. It would really mean a lot. And help us also get to 12K subs for the next short-term goal, because we're just around or just under 500 away. And again, thank you so much for the continued support, guys. It's been awesome doing all this coverage throughout the offseason and in general, just a whirlwind of a year. Tomorrow is officially the 1-year anniversary on WardyNYM, and I'm very excited about that. Vin, thank you so much for the $2 donation. Who's better between Baez or Bryant? It depends on what you're looking for, right? Overall wise, you're saying Bryant because he's someone that literally MVP in playoffs, right? Has someone that's been inconsistent in his career, but has versatility, ability to play upwards of 5+ positions, and is someone that, if we're emphasizing on base, and that's why we're going to be getting into Bryant more throughout the live stream, stay tuned for that. He's a career 375 average on base guy. So it all depends on what a team is looking for. Baez is by far the better defender. It's not even close. Bryant's a solid defender, but by no means is he Javy Baez. Javy Baez makes jaw-dropping plays in that field basically on a daily basis, and he has that ability on the bags. That's something that Chris Bryant can't compete with. So if you're looking for the defensive and small ball things on bags, Javy Baez any day of the week. But if you're talking about what they have both done in their careers respectively, and someone that can give you more versatility and has clutched up in playoffs more often than someone like Baez. Again, Baez has done well in playoffs, so it's not a slight on him. But it all depends on your priority. So obviously Baez is no longer an option for the Mets. So who would be great? Of course, Bryant would be an awesome option if they go down that route. And again, we'll get into that shortly in the live stream. Thank you so much for the donation, Ben. But yeah, I know there's a lot of talk going on with Bryant right now. I proposed on Twitter. A lot of people are talking about that too, and we'll get into that. David, thank you so much for the $5 donation. Got to work on Bryant now and move Escobar to second. That, again, that could be a possibility. The Mets go down. I'm going to explain shortly as to why that can happen and why that very well may not happen. And I know it's going to upset people if they don't necessarily want to see the fact that the Mets don't necessarily look like a strong fit for Bryant right now. But again, I'm going to get into why there's optimism and pessimism on those fronts like anything else, right? But furthermore on Baez and the Mets falling out here, Billy Epler, he's in a spot right now where I trust the decisions 100% that the man's making. And Baez, what he's doing now, and I should have known better because there was actually a comment through a live stream of some people talking about MLB news yesterday. I think it was on Instagram, and I saw it on Twitter from a Mets fan, and she said that the person that commented said that, breaking news, Baez is going to sign 6 years, $140 million deal with the Tigers. This was last night, like before it was even late. I think it was during the live stream when that happened. And afterward, or it was right after the live stream. And then we find out the news at like 2 a.m. That looks like that they're finalizing a deal. So that person had a right. That person is also followed by Baez's wife on Instagram. So, they had it before a lot of other people did. But the point I'm trying to make though is there's no ill will here. I get it from Baez's side, and I get it from the Mets side. I would have loved Baez back with the Mets, but by no means am I going to fault them for not wanting to go 6 years. And something that's going to be very interesting here on the Baez front, and again, I don't know the likelihood of it. It's all going to be indicative on how the Mets address the infield going forward, if they do short-term options still or long-term. But a really big selling point that could have been for Baez with the Tigers also is his opt-out. As of now, it looks like he has a player option and opt-out after year 2 of his contract. Baez is going to just be turning 31 because his birthday is December 1st. He will be just turning 31 2 years from now when he is a free agent. So he is planning more than likely to hit the market again if the Tigers are not in a position per se where they're, all in, or maybe they don't want to commit to him long term. So there's a very strong chance that Baez will be hitting the market again in a couple years. And the Mets are still on short-term routes potentially for second base. It really wouldn't be a big surprise if the Mets rekindle their relationship with Baez a couple years from now, depending on the state of their team, depending on the status of Baez in Detroit, on what his comfortability is there. So again, don't bet on it. Don't think anything like that. But my point is that Baez very well can hit the market while he's still in his prime a couple years from now. I'm sure that was actually a big selling job for him to go to the Tigers, and that went in hand with him getting the high AAVs, making over $23 million a year for 6 years on average. Right now, he has a 10-team no-trade list as well during that contract. So again, it wouldn't be surprising if the Mets actually circle back to him a couple years from now, depending on the state of the team and if they're looking for something to be addressed at second base to rekindle Lindor again. And if they don't, it's perfectly fine too. So I really do think that was a huge selling factor from Detroit's part, because from the Mets side of things, I don't see why the Mets would give Baez an opt-out like that. Clearly they would want him on probably, between a 3, 4, or at most 5-year deal. I'd say 3 or 4 makes sense, but they would probably want him all those years, right? So a player option after just 2 years of a contract, that was probably the biggest deciding factor on top of everything else that we know to this point regarding him going to Detroit versus potentially staying in Queens. So again, to kind of wrap up my initial thoughts on Baez, Mets, falling part, it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but I think that we should just appreciate for a second how damn good Javy Baez was during his time in Queens, because we have a lot. Martino did a tweet. I'll get into that in a second. Javy Baez, again, cannot emphasize enough how damn good he was with the Mets. Thumbs down, no problem. His offense and his impact spoke for itself. 47 games played with the Mets, 9 home runs, 22 RBIs, had himself 32 runs scored, a 299 batting average, 371 on base, which is literally absurd considering his career on base is 307. And again, that's another thing. If the Mets are really looking for good on base guys that are constantly getting the ball in play, Baez isn't the route for them to go down. So that makes sense if this is what their thought process is, which I'm assuming it is for Epler, because he made that known in his presser when he first got hired. A 515 slugging and an 886 OPS and a OPS plus of 141. So again, tip of the cap to Baez, wishing him nothing but the best with the Tigers. No ill will against the man at all. I'm still going to be rooting for him. Always been a Javy Baez fan. Now I can even further be a Javy Baez fan, knowing that he at least had a stint with the Mets. Even if it wasn't long-term, I understand why both sides probably couldn't come to agreement here. Heroic, thank you so much for the $5 donation. I've been in the chat for Heroic. Heard a rumor as trade Matt Chapman and reliever for J.D. Davis and McNeil. I heard this in NYC where I live. Okay, I mean, there's been a lot of rumors going on with the Athletics, because Andy Martino, as we said in last night's live stream, came out on SNY and said that nothing's imminent, but the A's, of course, could be a trade partner, and Shamanai is a guy that comes to mind pitching-wise. The Mets obviously still want another bona fide starter in this rotation. Easily be a number 3, I'd imagine. Then you can have Cookie Carrasco or Taiwan Walker as your 4 and the other as 5, and Tyler McGill, David Pearson as your depth stars, stuff like that. So, Heroic, thank you so much for the $5 donation. Really, really appreciate that. I'm going to get to the Martino tweet now. If he did tweet anything, I don't think he did. I'll just double check though, and then we'll go from there. But really, in a nutshell, after what I've broken down for you guys in regards to Baez parting ways with the Mets, would you say that you have a little bit more of a better understanding as to why this fell through? Or do you think that there's still a lot more things that need to be said on why it didn't happen? Again, from all the information that we have right now, it seems like that there's enough to indicate why the Mets didn't go long-term with Baez. There's enough to indicate as to why Baez wanted to go long-term somewhere else. But yeah, just let me know what your thoughts are in the chat right now, folks, as I look up the Martino tweet anything. There is Rodon rumors that started yesterday that we talked about in live stream. We'll talk about it a little bit shortly here, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more in a second live stream this evening, because that's where I want to emphasize, everything else that's going on with the Mets, because this is really focused on how do the Mets go from here without Baez, right? Because that's what I really want this live stream to be about. But yes, the Mets have reached out to Carlos Rodon. The only reason why I didn't do like an individual video on it or anything at this point is because we touched on it so much in last night's live stream, and it's just a fluent situation, and I'm sure that we'll hear more potentially today. Here's a story on what happened with the Mets and Javy Baez. Topics of interest. Okay. All right. So Andy Martino just came out with a piece regarding further on why the Mets and Javy Baez had a falling out. I'm gonna skim through it briefly to see if there's any points that should be acknowledged that I didn't mention yet. So bear with me as I do that, folks. And again, continue to smash that like and subscribe on if you guys are enjoying this. Thomas, I get the frames from Walmart. Just ball on a budget. It's so easy to get frames and just put a newspaper in it. It looks so dope on your wall. Yeah, we'll talk about Bryant too. Don't you guys worry. I'm glad that a lot of you guys are starting to understand a little bit more. Reading these numbers are a waste of time. No, I don't think it is in regards to Baez's stats with the Mets. I loved him with the Mets. I think that there should be at least acknowledgement that he was good with the Mets, and I'm going to be appreciative of that. I thoroughly enjoyed Baez's time in Queens. I don't know how many times I need to make that clear for everybody, but I'm glad that everyone's starting to have a better grasp on things. So let's see. Okay, so in this article from Andy Martino, he goes on to say how Sandy was intrigued by Baez's improvements, but still cautious about how much, he trusted them going further. Let's see. Okay, so here's from Andy Martino's piece, folks. And it says, and I quote, this is straight from the article. Make sure to read it, guys, if you haven't already. Early in talks with Baez, Alderson floated a proposal for $125 million. So Sandy Alderson is the one that proposed the deal, because obviously this was prior to Billy Epler coming in as GM. The Mets were prepared to move quickly on a deal. We all knew this. We all talked about this as well, between Baez and the Mets trying to rekindle a relationship right after the season ended. But Baez's camp knew that other teams had interest, and they really wanted to take advantage of that. And Baez got an additional $15 million because of it. And he makes a good point. Have you ever walked away from an additional $15 million? I have not. And I don't blame Baez for what he did here. And like I said, all the other factors are brought in regards to why the Mets and Baez, relationship has ended. But that's really all there is to know on the Baez front. If anything further comes down the notion on what the Mets direction is going forward, we'll make sure to address it either in this live stream or in a video or in a further live stream, stuff like that. Would like to keep you guys in mind too. I will be doing a giveaway this week. It might wait until the end of the week. I might happen tomorrow on the 1-year anniversary. I'm going to try to get a video out soon. I did tell people though that if we do hit 12K subs this week, then we'll do 3 giveaways, but we would have to hit it within the next couple of days, or it'll just be 2 giveaways. But no less, guys, make sure to look out for a short video on the channel at some point this week, hopefully tomorrow, if not within the coming days, on giveaways and how you guys can enter. All you'll have to do is just enter by putting, a comment in the comments below, making sure you're subscribed and liking and all that kind of fun stuff. But yes, giveaway will be coming on the channel, as I mentioned. I'm very excited to get that out there for originally hitting 10K subs, and now we're almost at 12K, which is absurd. But all right, folks, so now we know everything to this point between Baez, Detroit, the Mets. So what is next for the Mets, right? What are their infield options? Well, let's talk a minute about Jeff McNeil, because Jeff McNeil, John Heyman said Twitter that Mets are back on Bryant. I've not seen anything from Heyman to indicate that the Mets are actually back on Bryant. I just know that there's speculation that the Mets could pivot to Bryant now potentially, and that the Mets are still looking for another bat. So, like I said, we're going to get into Bryant more. If a report does come out further on the Mets and Bryant connection, we'll address that. But I did not see anything from Heyman. I'll double check, but I think that's cap right now. We'll see. Yeah, it is. Yeah, nothing further on Heyman right now. Entertainer? Yeah, I like Entertainer. He does a good job. Entertainer Talking Sports, I think, is who you're talking about. Yeah, he does a good job. He's a big Mets fan, I know. But guys, let's talk for a second about Jeff McNeil, because McNeil, I have really seesawed with, man. I really have, because on one hand, you're looking at a guy who has been an absolute hothead, who struggled, got himself into confrontation with Javy Baez. Again, those things happen, but it went in hand with McNeil not being proper with his shifts at second base, which was a detriment to the defense for the Mets when they're a great shifting team. And Francisco Lindor himself, who hates doing the shift, he doesn't like doing it at all, knows he needs to do it because that's the world that we're living in for baseball now. And Lindor was arguably the best shortstop in baseball in 2021 defensively with a 99 percentile OAA. So he knows what he's doing defensively. We were all aware of that. He was a plus 20 in that position as well. Just amazing. But they had a little bit of ruffling the feathers. Then we saw that McNeil was out for a bit, dealing with injuries with the hamstring. We know that he was wasn't doing well with Zach Scott. Zach Scott basically called him out on things without actually saying his name. And McNeil did not have a good year. And I think that went in hand with, of course, his mentality, because he's a guy that rides off of emotion. When he's on, he's on. He loves it. But, dude, as soon as that man grounds out once, he's yelling F-bombs down first base. It's really hard for him to get composed. And we saw that evident in 2021, the first year where he significantly struggled, because every year before that, he's been a 300 average hitter. He's been one of the most consistent hitters in baseball contact-wise since he arrived with the Mets, coming from AAA. But McNeil had a down year, and he's someone that very well could be traded this offseason. And just as we did in our video on the channel, that has plenty of views, thank you so much for that, on 5 Mets who won't return this offseason, a lot has changed now. And I think what could be said here, if Billy Epler is truly prioritizing, one, making sure that you have great on-base guys that are constantly getting ball in play, and two, knowing that Jeff McNeil is for certain going to bounce back next year, regardless on if you guys are for or against it. I will say this: Jeff McNeil is someone that is going to do great things in his baseball career, regardless on if he's with the Mets. Just how I feel with Michael Conforto. I know Mike's going to bounce back just fine, and I do not think that we should put much stock offensively into McNeil's anomaly of a year in 2021. He's for certain, I do believe he's going to get back to being that upwards, if not higher, 300 contact self. Now, the thing with McNeil is, one, the relationship defensively with Lindor. How is that going to impact things? And two, now that Baez is gone, if the Mets do want to focus again on those high on base guys, Billy Epler could be looking at Jeff McNeil like, man, you are exactly what I want on this team. Now, again, we're going to see what comes of this. There's a good likelihood that McNeil could be utilized as an ultra utility guy next season, could be utilized potentially as someone that is a trade chip for a move that makes most sense for the Mets in the scenario where there isn't room for McNeil. But how we're evaluating the club right now, Jeff McNeil has a spot on this roster, and yes, it's at second base, and Eduardo Escobar would be at third base. So I know that's not necessarily something that Mets fans want to see heading into 2022, but I'm telling you that if that is the route that the Mets go down at second base, by no means is it an end-all situation. I've never been someone that has been advocating to fully be, okay, Jeff McNeil has to be traded. Even as I said in my video, I don't want Jeff McNeil traded, but if he's a man without a position, knowing how much value he has, how much good is he going to do by simply being a guy off the bench, right? So now that he isn't blocked from Baez, that's a really, really interesting question that I'm sure the Mets are facing right now. Maybe they already have a decision on. But McNeil is someone that I think is a huge wild card on if he'll stay with the Mets or if he'll be traded this offseason. I'm in favor of the Mets keeping McNeil. If they do, in fact, keep him at second base, I think he's going to do just fine. He just needs to not be as stubborn. He needs to get himself together. He's a solid defender. He was a plus DRS at the position in 2021 at second base. So him and Lindor just need to get themselves figured out there, because Lindor is obviously a stud defensively and something that McNeil can definitely try to work with more. But I'm not against McNeil as long as he bounces back. But I also understand if the Mets do part with him, all we would hope for is that obviously if they do part with him, it's because you either have Eduardo Escobar at second base, which he can handle perfectly fine. Again, it won't be a Javy Baez glove by any stretch, but it's going to be perfectly fine for what the Mets need right now. And then they can look for a different route at third base, or they could go down a route of having Escobar at third base or someone else potentially. Then you're looking for an external option at second base. And there are some external options still, but knowing that the Mets have two guys that are fully capable of playing second base, and Jeff McNeil's the guy right there that has room on this roster, I'd have to imagine that that is the route that they will go down until we're proven otherwise. Again, if we're proven otherwise, if trades happen, if things pick up, won't be surprising, because keep in mind that teams have been giving calls to the Mets about Jeff McNeil throughout this past week on a potential trade. And if McNeil is the X factor in getting a deal done for potentially a big name starting pitcher to be dressed in this rotation, maybe a team like the A's that we proposed, right? Or maybe something even third base route that the Mets really want to go down. Either way, the Mets seem like they're in a position that they still value McNeil. They know that he has plenty of value. It is not a detriment to the club if they have him back in 2022. starting the lineup at second base, nor would I say it's a detriment if they part ways with him, as long as obviously you're doing what's the best interest for the team, that you don't really have room for him, and knowing that you can maximize on his value. So even though that I know he had a down year, so I know his value won't be exactly the same as it was year prior, but everyone knows that if you're trading for Jeff McNeil, it's not for what he did in 2021. It's for what he's going to do in 2022 and beyond. He's on a favorable contract. He's not a free agent until 2025. Yes, there's good reason as to why numerous teams are already calling in about Jeff McNeil as a potential trade chip. But I do see a couple donations. I want to address them quick. And again, thank you so much for the support, folks. Continue to let me know your thoughts in the chat about Jeff McNeil or Eduardo Escobar potentially as your fit at second base. Again, not an end all at all. Obviously, I understand if people were like, we would have liked Baez there, but it is what it is now. But there are a lot of different routes the Mets can still go down here. But Jeff McNeil, this may have very well been a huge helping save for him on staying on the Mets next season. As I say that, maybe he'll get traded, later today. I'm joking. I don't see him getting traded right now. I don't think anything like that would happen until post lockout. But again, of course, everything is fluent until we get some news. Luis, thank you so much for the $5 donation again, my man. Unlike Noah, I understand completely for Javi taking the better offer. Maybe I'm being a selfish Mets fan, but I felt Noah owed it to the Mets resigning. Yeah, okay. I think that's a selfish look, Luis, and I really appreciate the donation. You can make that argument for sure, but at the end of the day, Noah went through a lot with the Mets, and while you can definitely say he went, the selfish route, and I think that can be justified, we all know how much disarray the Mets have been in as an organization just during Noah's tenure. And we also know that he's been rehabbing for 2 years now. And you have to wonder, has any of that been an impact with the people that he's been training with, trying to get him healthy, on delaying the things, because he was supposed to be back with the Mets, fairly early in 2021, by June. And then he had another setback, and then he got COVID and all these things. So I think Noah really just wanted to change his scenery. And he really got sold by Perry, who's the GM of the Angels, as to why he should come to the Angels and be utilized right, even if they potentially do a 6-man rotation, give him more rest. Because Perry, he said, according to Noah, he never interacted with a GM or an executive that had the amount of pitching knowledge that Perry did. So Perry, I think it was more so about Perry doing an insane selling job versus Noah saying, hey, I have no interest in coming back. Noah did want to come back to the Mets, but then he had someone give him insight to say that, hey, maybe this isn't the best route for you. Let's go to LA. Let's go to the Angels. Let's take you out of the noise with the uncertainties with the Mets at that point in time and let him try to flourish in what is a 1-year deal, and then he'll be a free agent. So if Noah has a big year, he'll be hitting the market. And I understand his standpoint. Again, whether we agree or disagree with it's a different story. But I don't think, everyone's going to have their opinions on Noah. I don't have ill will with the guy at all. But, he clearly did what he felt was best for him. And that's something that, is unfortunate to us fans that wanted him to stay on the team. But like everything else, it is what it is at the end of the day. I'm going to miss Baez big time. Guys, hype in the chat to my boy Richie at Mets Media. Guys, make sure to check him out at Mets Media. He's doing great content, picking up Mets content again, and at Jets and Knicks Media for all the other New York sports coverage. I know I'm going to miss Baez big time too, my man. But again, onward and upward. Guys, stay positive. Everything happens for a reason. And the Mets have done nothing this offseason truly to make me believe that they're not going down proper routes. So far, so good. So my trust is in them. Again, a little cautiously optimistic, but there's no denying that they know how to spend and they're trying to make the best moves possible. I'm glad that you like the song, Marco. Again, shout out to everybody else in the chat and appreciate all the donations and the likes. And so, I don't know where we are on the like count, folks, but like I said, help us get a 500 likes for the next short-term goal and 12K subs. Always appreciate it. But okay, so I asked this before. I'm going to scroll up and look in some of the comments here on talking about Escobar and McNeil. Let me go through a little bit further on how you guys feel about it. Ooh, if you guys heard that, my neck just literally snapped. That felt good, though. Okay, good thoughts, everybody, about McNeil and Escobar. But now let's talk about Schwarber. I don't see it happening. No. Schwarber, unfortunately, is going to go to a Mets rival, and he's going to smash another 10 home runs a season against us. Marlins and Phillies are the favorite right now. Not happy about that. Don't want him to go to the NL East again. But it feels almost inevitable right now with what reports are coming out. But talking about other options for the Mets externally, before we get to Chris Bryant, let's talk about Chris Taylor, because Chris Taylor is really a bargain. Chris Bryant. Chris Taylor has a lot of similarities to Chris Bryant as a guy that is a playoff performer, an ultra utility guy, just like KB, plays everywhere, infield and outfield, has been huge. I'm going to pull up Chris Taylor's numbers quick, but has been an unbelievably valuable piece for the Dodgers. And I'd be a little surprised if the Dodgers really let Taylor walk after losing both Seager and Scherzer. They have money that they're working with, but the big issue with Taylor is, of course, his compensation pick. If he didn't have a comp pick connected to him, I think the Mets would have be all in on this guy. I really do. I think this is going to be the biggest reason as to why the Mets don't land him, outside of the fact that Mariners and multiple other teams are heavily in on Chris Taylor right now. And it looks like he might have a decision potentially today before the lockout, because they need to get the physicals in before the actual lockout happens in December. But Chris Taylor, again, in 2021, if we take a look at him, age 30, let's see, 148 games played, 92 runs scored, 73 RBIs, 13 stolen bags, 20 home runs, 254 average, a 344 on base, very solid, very, very good. A 438 slugging, WRC plus of 113 was a 3.1 WAR, 16.5 plus on offense according to Fangraphs, and defense -5. But again, I wouldn't put stock in that considering he's playing literally everywhere. The guy played in center, second base, left field, shortstop, third base, and right field all in 2021. He literally played everywhere. So if you're looking for a guy that you can get cheaper to really help round things out, versatility wise, that isn't going to be as expensive as Chris Bryant, and you don't necessarily have to lock up nearly to potentially a 7-year deal. We don't know what Chris Bryant's going for, but I'd imagine it's going to be a long-term deal. Chris Taylor is the route to go, but you have to give up a compensation pick for him. Do I see the Mets giving up a first-round pick to sign Chris Taylor? No, I do not. As someone that really would love Chris Taylor on this team, especially when you look at Jeff McNeil. Jeff McNeil is essentially the Mets' Chris Taylor. And don't get me wrong, it's awesome to have two guys that are similar, that will be, getting on base constantly and also versatile. But at the same time, for what the cost will be for Taylor prospect-wise and giving up that first-round pick, I would be awfully surprised if the Mets find themselves going down that route. But I do want to know to everyone that's watching the live stream now or on replay, let me know in the comments too. How do you feel about Chris Taylor? Again, I don't think the Mets are going to go and go after him because of the compensation pick from what they've expressed at this point. But how would you guys feel about Chris Taylor? Do you think that there's any chance of the Mets going after him? Or are you kind of under the stance like me that you don't think it's going to happen solely because of the fact that he will be tied to a compensation pick? And unfortunately, the Mets would have to give up a first-round pick, unlike all the other clubs in baseball, because they would have to give up their second-round pick. Mets have 2 first-round picks. So let me hear everyone's thoughts in the chat right now. Help us get a 300 likes, folks. Like I said, we're trying to get a 500 by the end of the stream. Always appreciated my 700 plus viewers. Make sure to smash those buttons. Helps the algorithm. Really helps out the channel as well if you're enjoying the stream. Are the Mets on his no trade? I mean, no, he's not a trade chip. He's a free agent in regards to Taylor. Okay, it seems like the common belief that I'm getting in the chat right now as we're watching live is that most of you guys understand that it's not realistic for Taylor, and that you might not even want the Mets to go down that route because of how much he would cost, not just the contract, but more so because of the compensation pick. I get that. I think everyone's kind of on the same page. Again, Taylor, if you're looking for a second base replacement, if the Mets traded Jeff McNeil already, I think that there would be a further adamancy to potentially go after Taylor if you want to keep Escobar a third. But the Mets aren't in that spot right now. They have a lot of ability that they can still do infield-wise. So, yeah, I don't think Taylor will happen, but he is a name to keep out there because he's like probably the most significant name that would play second base, and that's versatile for the Mets through free agency right now. Just not likely. I don't see it happening. I think he's going to sign somewhere soon. I don't think it'll be with the Mets. If it's with the Mets, that'll be like Max Scherzer. It'll be a big surprise. So we'll see. Mets have been sneaky this offseason, though. Hey, Worry, who are some picks that you would who are some players that I would give up the pick for? Quite frankly, after doing more and more evaluation, the only guy that I would feel unbelievably comfortable doing it for is Carlos Correa. Everyone else I have natural concerns for, even Chris Taylor, even in Nick Castellanos and others. They would definitely help the team now, but given the opportunities that you have elsewhere, again, if there's one guy that I would be more comfortable than anything else to give up a pick, it's Carlos Correa. Correa isn't happening, obviously. I don't know if you guys know that by now. you would have to fool me silly and make me go crazy in a live stream to see Carlos Correa come to the Mets and not even play shortstop. I do not see that happening one bit. But all right, folks, let's get into Kris Bryant, because KB is something that, as I talked about on Twitter, I proposed the fact that, if this is continuing the vision that the Mets are trying to go down when it comes to Billy Epler, when it comes to focusing on base guys and guys that have versatility too. Let's not forget that guys like Canha Marte can play all over the outfield, and Escobar can play multiple positions in the infield. If that's the route the Mets are going down, and now that they lost out on Baez, Mike Puma presented as well, could they find themselves back in the Bryant sweepstakes? There's been rumblings. There's been a lot of rumors. I haven't seen anything factual right now, however, to suggest that they will go down that route, rather that it just would make sense if they do. So if we do get reports on it, we will, of course, address them as they happen. Maybe it'll even happen in later tonight's live stream, because we have another live stream coming later, as you guys probably know by now. But KB is someone that's going to command a longer-term deal. Is there potential that you could get KB at a deal shorter than Baez, maybe 5 years? I know Robert says Bryant will ask for a 5-year deal. Will that be appealing to the Mets? I don't know, because as we talked about in last night's live stream, as I talked about with Kris Bryant a lot, the positives of Kris Bryant. Let's start with the positives, right? Let's get all in on Kris Bryant. The Mets have been trying to get Kris Bryant since we started the channel last offseason. They have been ingrained on him for the longest time, trying to have him as an upgrade at third base and really help build the Mets a winner, a guy that, while he's dealt with some inconsistencies in his career, he shows up when it matters most in playoffs, and he brings that versatility. Now, what makes the versatility key, as I talked about last night too, is the fact that if the Mets get Kris Bryant in the hypothetical scenario, right? You have him at third base. Brett Baty is ready to come up to the Mets in a year or two from now, right? In that scenario, you can move Kris Bryant to potentially the corner outfield or a different position overall where he's going to handle it just fine. You could even put potentially Brett Baty or someone at a DH role with the assumption that we're getting a universal DH. So KB doesn't really look like he's actually going to block the likelihood of a Brett Baty coming to the Mets within the next year or two. So that's what makes him awfully enticing. You're getting a big bat. You're getting a guy that, while, again, I do have concerns with how Kris Bryant is going to age, but I do know that he's unbelievably valuable. He has that versatility, and he would, of course, be a huge get for the Mets if they would be able to land him. Now, getting into exactly why Kris Bryant may very well not happen, and as much as I would like it to happen, there's a lot of logical reasons as to why it won't. And let's get into the reasons as to why it potentially won't, or probably won't. Well, one, what we know right now is that we've seen multiple reports at this point in time, at the time being live here, the Mets don't really plan to address any more position players until after the lockout. They're looking pretty set right now until after the lockout to make more additions on the position player, or just in general, maybe. If that is the case, then obviously you're probably losing out Kris Bryant, because Kris Bryant, who could wait until after the lockout, there's been a lot of talk with him of recent. The Toronto Blue Jays and the Mariners have been deemed as the favorites for him of recent, according to John Morosi. I think that was reported earlier today, if not yesterday. The Phillies have been in on KB, who I said would make a lot of sense for them because they have money to throw at a guy, and KB would definitely help them in a lot of ways. Any infield and outfield help, checks off the boxes, is close with Bryce Harper. They're both Las Vegas natives. So that is something that very well could come into fruition. But keeping in mind that KB is someone where if the Mets were adamant about not wanting Baez on a long-term deal, not just because of the fact of where Baez is at in his career, but in general, if they do not want to go long-term deals with really anyone, I don't see how they get KB. I really don't. 5 year might be that 5 year might be that sweet spot for them, and circumstances very well could be different with Kris Bryant because he's a far different player than Javy Baez. They're not remotely close. Baez is a better defender. KB's far more versatile, big bat, huge in playoffs as well, and really can just help out your lineup in so many different ways. So, like anything else, there's a lot of positives to bringing in Kris Bryant for sure, but there's also negatives as to why I don't think it will necessarily happen. So, on the optimistic route, I'm going to say that, yes, we very well could see the Mets connected to KB. But if KB is someone that is determined to get a deal done potentially before the lockout, that might be an X factor in the Mets not being able to jump in the sweepstakes enough because they just dealt with Max Scherzer. That took up a boatload of their time. Now they're going to just focus on the pitching market, as we know that they're involved in, and we'll talk about more in tonight's live stream probably. So they have all these different routes they can go down, but before we go further, I do want to address a donation. Thank you so much for the comments and the donos, guys. As always, help us get to 300 likes and 500 likes by the end of the stream would really mean a lot. And yes, we'll get into the Chris Bryant statistics more because I want to break down more on his versatility and really his value, what it would be in the Mets, and exactly how much is it worth it or not worth it. King Stone, thank you so much for the $5 donation, my man. Conan lost out on Matt, signed Marte, Canna, Escobar. Conan lost out on Gosman, signed Max. Now we lost out on Baez. Buckle up, Stevie, gonna go ham. Again, it's funny that you say that, King Snow. I think that, those have been factors to a certain extent. I don't think that the Mets are going to act emotionally, however. I don't think that Steve is like, I have to make these signings just because I'm mad. No, Mets are making the proper moves, and Billy Epler, Steve Cohen, all of them are helping leading the charge. I will say, however, if we're basing things on the trend that has happened at this point, then yeah, you might have something there, King Snow. It is funny thinking about that. They lose out on Mats, make 3 signings. They lose out on Gosman. They get Max. Even though I will say that it looks like that Max was always the priority and Gosman was the backup plan. But yeah, it's funny that you say that. Hype in the chat at King Snow with the $5 donation. Really, really appreciate that. So let's go into the Chris Bryant's numbers. And yes, I know that the Giants have had a reluctance to bring back KB, and I know that they're involved analytically. I would love Kyle Schwarber for DH. I don't see it happening though. I would be very surprised if we land Kyle Schwarber at this rate, given the fact that the Phillies and the Marlins are so adamant. Again, all it takes is one phone call to change things, but don't get your hopes up on that in regards to Schwarber. He's going to unfortunately start killing us again next season. I don't think he's going to be on our side. KB though, 2021 stats. Let's look at him. He had 3.6 WAR, had himself a 123 WRC plus, 265 average, 353 on base, who has a 376 career on base, WOBA of 356, and 25 home runs in the 144 games played, splitting time with the Cubs and the Giants. And I'm looking for the RBIs here. Okay, 86 RBIs, total runs scored. He had. He had 73 RBIs, but he had 86 runs scored. That was directly in hand with him getting on base as much as he has. And if you look at Bryant's numbers throughout his career, he's been someone that outside of 2020, which was a short season, he only played a handful of games and also dealt with injury. Taking away the short 2020 season where he literally was injured the entire 30 games he played, we're looking at a KB that on base wise has been nothing short of what he was in 2021. 2021 was the lowest on base KB has had in his career through a normal 162 type season, at least 100 games played at 353. Chris Bryant in 2019, we all know the story there. 31 home runs, 108 runs scored, 77 RBIs, a 382 on base, ridiculous, and a 521 slugging. 2018, 374 on base. 2017, 409, and of course 2016, 385, and rookie year 369. So the thing with KB that a lot of people are worried about is the fact that he is someone that in certain ways has been on the decline. Now, I don't know how much stock we can put into Chris Bryant on having his lowest on base in 2021, given the fact that he's dealt with all these stresses leading up, coming off of an injury heading into 2021 after starting off red hot, but splitting teams too with the Giants and the Cubs, always looming on what his future was going to be. I think that once Chris Bryant gets a destination, regardless on if it's with the Mets or not, he's going to be in a position where he's going to get back to really ramping up. Chris Bryant is a consistent 25-plus home run machine. You're getting between 75 to 90 RBIs a season. He's going to get you that on-base clip really strong, and he's going to give you that versatility that's so valuable to teams, especially teams like the Mets that can definitely use it between inevitable injuries. And also, if they don't want to do anything else with their outfield, you have KB. So that way, if you have games that maybe you want Escobar at third and potentially McNeil at second, then you can have KB in the corner outfields, and the assumption that you still have McNeil. So Mets can get unbelievably creative in the scenario where they do land Chris Bryant. But as I said before, and I'll say again, there are valid reasons as to why this may not happen. There are valid reasons as to why the Mets may not throw a big paycheck at anyone available still regarding position player wise, because they don't want to necessarily go long term with anyone. If that's a route that they don't want to go down, I can understand that wholeheartedly. But again, KB is someone that I'd have to imagine that the Mets have some level of interest here. I know Jack Ramsey said that. Again, we'll see what happens on the Chris Bryant front. But I want to know everyone's initial thoughts here in the chat, guys. Would you be in favor or would you be against Chris Bryant potentially coming to the New York Mets? Let me know in the chat how you feel about that point. And then we'll talk about KB a little bit more, and then we'll get into some trade options and then wrap things up with more of a Q&A. Rick, thank you so much for the $4.99 donation. Appreciate that, my man. Can you explain how the Mets have gone better? In my eyes, we lost more than we gained. We lost Stroman, Baez, Syndergaard, Loop, Conforto. Okay, Mets need to change things up. They feel adamant that with everything that transpired, they feel that the core from 2019 isn't going to get it done. And naturally, I agree that mixing things up, if you're going to do it, just go all in. Don't do a rebuild, but do a retool and bring in good talent. That's what the Mets are doing. I'm someone that does believe Michael Conforto is going to bounce back. I'm someone that believes that Noah Syndergaard is going to be fine. I'm someone that believes that Aaron Loop's going to be okay, but he won't be the same that he was in 2021. I'm someone that believes that Javy Baez is going to continue to be a very valuable player, and I'm someone that believes that Marcus Stroman is going to be a valuable pitcher. But when you look at the individual reasons as to why those guys are not coming to the Mets, part of what the Mets are already or on the verge of being gone with the Mets, and Conforto and Stroman being the two pending free agents on this list. Stroman really looks like he shot himself in his own foot, and the Mets are looking for another starting pitcher. They already got Max Scherzer. As long as they get someone that could be a very solid, potentially number 3 or number 4, it's not going to hurt them losing Stroman in the end. And clearly they have reasons as to why they're not prioritizing him to this point. As good, as consistent as Stroman has been, there's reasons behind why the Mets are going down the route that they are. And I trust the route that they're going down. I think they've done a great job so far in a nutshell. Conforto, a little bit of a different story because he's a guy who had an anomaly of a year after doing great in 2019 and 2020. Had himself in a spot where, yeah, he dealt with injuries and really wasn't consistent all year long. I do think Michael's going to bounce back just fine, but I think Michael wants to change his scenery, and I don't think the Mets want to go long-term to Michael Conforto, knowing that there's still uncertainties on his part. So I'm a Michael Conforto fan. He's my favorite player, if you guys know by now. If you've been watching the live streams or watching the videos, he's always been since he came to the New York Mets in that World Series in 2015. But it really does seem like that's the end of him. But you bring in Starling Marte, you bring in Mark Canha. What do these guys have in common? They get on base at a far greater clip, going to give you more consistency, going to help you balance out the outfield. The Mets may still go down another route outfield-wise, especially if you get Chris Bryant that gives you versatility. When it comes to actually the bullpen, the Mets are involved in the bullpen. I'm not really concerned about the bullpen right now. They're going to add more arms. I don't think that they're necessarily, let me put it this way. They haven't addressed all the holes yet. So they're a better team than what they were last year when it comes from a strict talent level on how they would perform, especially with Scherzer leading the way, but they have more moves that they need to make. We're fully aware of that. But in regards to just in a nutshell, I do think the Mets are on a perfect path right now. I love what they're doing. And as long as they continue to do this, as long as they continue to make moves, address the rotation with at least one more starter, address the bullpen, and get another position player, at least in that infield, they're going to find themselves in a really good position next year. So again, I can understand. Don't get me wrong. A lot of the guys that you have listed here are going to flourish still. It's not the point of them still being good players because they all are. They're all really good players, some of them. But it's the matter of how good are they in Queens? How good are they of a fit right now? What is the culture like in that locker room? And what is the type of outlook the Mets have in the years going forward? They're in a win now stage while trying to build the farm still. So I perfectly understand why they're going down the routes that they will. And I understand the player side of things. That's something that can't be ignored. You have to realize that there's more to just the Mets having interest in bringing a player back. Clearly, the player has to have interest in wanting to return to and at the right price. And there are plenty of times with Baez being the latest situation where they both had an interest in rekindling their relationship, but they just couldn't reach a deal that feels best for both sides. And you have to respect that at the end of the day. It's part of the business. Appreciate the donation, though, Rick. Thank you so much for that. Okay, a lot of you guys are saying favor. Okay, some of you guys are not in favor of KB. Okay. Darren, thank you so much for the donation as well. Hey, we got a package post tomorrow to you. Oh, thank you so much, Darren. You're an absolute beauty. Just a little something to celebrate your 1-year anniversary. Need your P.O. box, please, mate. All right, Darren, I have my P.O. box information in the description of this live stream. So if you just go look in the description down below, I have my P.O. box information there. That's all you got to go to get it. So let me know if you have any issues with that, but it should all be right there for you. It says P.O. box, says the address and all that stuff. And thank you so much in advance. Hype in chat for Darren. I don't know what you're sending me, Darren, but that makes me excited. I always appreciate your support, my man. I'm looking forward to meeting you at some point during the upcoming season. Okay. Do I think Baez will play second? Do I think that Baez will play second to bring Carlos Rodon? I'm trying to read your comment. My mistake, guys. Hold on. Oh, Carlos Correa. I thought you said Rodon. My mistake. No, I don't think Correa is going to go to Detroit. I would be really surprised if Correa goes to Detroit at this point and Baez plays second. If he does, though, then that tells you more so on the money, strictly in the term, as to why Baez left, more so on the position. It wouldn't be impossible, but I find it fairly hard to believe at this point that Correa would still land with Detroit after locking down Javy Baez. But again, we'll see. Like anything else, we will, of course, see. And guys, we're awfully close to 300 likes, so make sure to continue smashing that like and subscribe button. Again, folks, if you are enjoying the stream, thank you all so much for the continued support as well. Really, really, really appreciate it as always, guys. I will be shocked if Bryant signs with the Mets. I wouldn't be shocked, but I would be surprised right now. But if there's one thing that Steve Cohen has shown us this offseason and Billy Epler, when they want a guy, they're going to get him. That's why they got Max Scherzer. That's why they got Eduardo Escobar. That's why they got Mark Canha. That's why they got Starling Marte. All guys that were desirable to varying degrees that could have went to different teams. Clearly, the Mets, as long as they are fully locked in on someone, they're going to give their absolute best effort. Obviously, they're not going to land everyone. But if they have that same approach with KB, they have the money. Money is not a problem for the Mets. Money wasn't even a problem for Baez. I really think it was more so term than it was money for them, because if they were looking for $125 million, they were probably doing that obviously on a shorter term deal, not 6 years, which is what he ended up getting with the Detroit Tigers. And of course, that opt out, I think, goes into play, as I said earlier in the live stream. Okay, folks, let's talk about trades for a little bit. Let's talk about trades before we get into Q&A and wrap up the live stream, because we still have some more time to go here. Like I said, I'll probably be live again, folks, either at 7 or 8, right as the tender deadline happened, to talk more on everything regarding this team. So keep an eye on that, because I want to deep dive really all the potential moves. I think we're going to have some moves happen for sure from now until the tender deadline at 8 p.m., especially regarding the Mets. We have to see who they keep and part with, because the Mets don't have enough room for everyone on their active roster, the 40-man. But regarding trade options, this is what could be interesting too. So Billy Epler made it known that they're going to be heavily ingrained in the free agent market. We're all very aware of that to this point, right? But they're naturally going to make trades. Now, the question is, what kind of trades are they going to make? And we talked about the Oakland A's. I would love it if the Mets become a suitor with the Oakland A's. And something that makes a lot more sense than just what it did in last night's live stream, because people were asking me, oh, Matt Chapman, let's get Matt. I would love Matt Chapman, but in this scenario where the Mets brought back Baez, it didn't make nearly as much sense, because Chapman, given his contract, just has a couple years left of control. That's a short-term option, assuming that you have him as a placeholder for Brett Beatty potentially, right? Eduardo Escobar, as of now, is a short-term third base option. Same thing, 2-year deal, right? So I don't see the appeal from the Mets per se, and going after Chapman if Escobar is what you're planning to have as your short-term third base option, which would be perfectly fine leading up to Beatty. I'm not against that if that's the route that they're going down. But having said that, now that Baez is out of the picture, this changes the ball a lot, because if you either have McNeil or Escobar, maybe they could platoon both at second base. Maybe you even have Escobar as a potential DH. And no, I'm not even going to bother talking about Robbie Cano, because I don't see how Robbie Cano is in the starting lineup. The only exception I think could be DH, nothing else. But point I'm trying to make is that circumstances have actually changed quite a bit in just a couple hours since we did our last live stream. So Chapman, I think, would make sense to have him at the hot corner. I would love him. You know, he's a platinum glove. And yes, I know that he's a decent swing and miss for sure. I don't know exactly how appealing that would be for someone like Billy Epler if he really is emphasizing huge on base guys. But Chapman is still someone where defensively you're gaining arguably the best in baseball at the position. Still in his prime. Had an up and down year coming off of hip surgery, and I'm sure that he's going to be more in a rhythm next year. Can hit absolute bombs. We'll get into Chapman's numbers here in a second, but yeah, we know how good Matt Chapman is, and obviously if you tag along a Sean Manaea or Chris Bassett with him, that gives you that third starter in the rotation that the Mets are desperately looking for. And I do believe the Mets could get a trade done in a package like this without having to give up a top prospect. I really do think that there's a possibility, but that would probably mean the likelihood of either a Jeff McNeil being parted with, maybe a young pitcher and a David Pearson or a Tyler McGill, one of the two, a JD Davis or a Dom Smith. It all depends here, but I understand trade Dom McGill for Means and sign Strong Conforto. I don't think are coming back, my man. I'm sorry to break it to you. As I said, it's very unlikely right now. And I would be a little surprised if the Mets trade for John Means too, knowing the options as of now in the pitching market still. Looking at Matt Chapman's numbers here, again, 2021, Chapman had himself 27 home runs, 75 RBIs. This is his second most home runs he's had in his career, too. His best year was in the last full season, 2019, where he had 36 home runs and 102 RBIs. Chapman, again, is a multi-100 RBI hitter. He's only been in the league for 5 years now, and he had a 210 average. So, yes, I know the average isn't pretty, but you're not focusing on the average when you're evaluating Matt Chapman. A 3.4 WAR, just over 100 WRC plus coming off of his first year from significant hip surgery. A 314 on base, so not great, but again, right around an Eduardo Escobar type. They're awfully similar, but obviously the biggest difference is Chapman is a huge stud defensively, like in a class of his own. It really is. Looking at value just through Fangraphs, Chapman defense was a plus 10.8. Yeah, just an absolute stud. I don't know how many times I need to preach how good of a defensive third baseman Matt Chapman is. But again, I don't know if Matt Chapman is the route that the Mets will go down. It will be something that I'm sure that they may consider. But that is going to be a big question mark with Eduardo Escobar, because I do think Eduardo Escobar is going to be a starting player in this lineup, especially after losing Baez. Whether that's at second, third, or potentially DH, we will soon find out, hopefully. But again, Chapman would be awesome. Sean Manaea, we'll go through Manaea's numbers. We'll talk more about Manaea and pitching later. I'll briefly touch on Manaea's numbers again, and same thing with Chris Bassett, because we're talking about those trade options. I don't think a J-Ram situation is happening. I would love Jose Ramirez, but he'll cost an arm and a leg. Mets don't have the prospect capital to match that they would be willing to part with, at least. Yeah, Manaea, 3.91 ERA in 2021, absolute stud in 32 appearances and just under 180 innings pitched. Very, very solid. And let's see. Now Chris Bassett as well. Bassett had a very, very good year, even after doing his best Kevin Pillar impression, getting drilled by a ball. But this time it wasn't on a pitch. It was by a comebacker, because he was the one throwing the pitch. Got drilled and actually came back after just under 5 weeks of, being hospitalized. He came back towards the end of the season. But Bassett, who has not thrown a lot of innings in his career because of the fact that he's been a reliever up until the 2019 season, is where he started to solidify himself as a starter. Bassett, though, in 2021, 157 innings pitched, had himself a very good year, 3.15 ERA. In 2020, in the short year, had a 2.29 ERA, and just over 60 innings pitched, had a 3.81 ERA in 2019, and in 2018 had a 3.02 ERA. So, yeah, Bassett, I think Bassett is one that actually can make a lot of sense for the Mets. If they're looking for just a pitcher in general, not necessarily if they're emphasizing righty or lefty, I think that they are. But especially in the scenario, if they're just looking for a middle of the pack starter, get him on a good deal. That would, of course, be Chris Bassett if you're looking at trade, because he only has 1 year left on his contract, in his 30s. He'll be a rental. Yeah, he's not a guy that's going to cost you an arm and a leg by any means. Fred, thank you so much for the $2 donation. Escobar, tell him my cousin David Peralta to come. Your cousin's Escobar, tell him, is Peralta your cousin? Is that what you're telling me, Santana? David Peralta from the Arizona Diamondbacks? Or are you just saying that about Escobar because of them both being when they were both with the Arizona Diamondbacks? Let me know. We all would love J-Ram, but again, that's not realistic. And some of you guys are talking about Ronnie Mauricio, so I would like to address Ronnie Mauricio here in the stream briefly, because Ronnie's someone who, again, is a shortstop, and we're getting awfully close to 300 likes, folks. So again, continue to smash that like and subscribe button if you're enjoying the stream. Thank you all so much for the likes and the subscriptions and the support, as always, folks. Love and appreciate you all. We all know that Ronnie Mauricio is one of the most coveted prospects for the Mets. Had a very good year in 2021. Yes, I know he's still a big swing and miss, but a lot of pop in his bat, can spread the field for opposite power. And Mauricio is someone where he doesn't have a position, he doesn't have room on this team. But could Mauricio have been a factor in not wanting to commit to Baez long term? Potentially. I don't think there's a lot of significance there. But Mauricio is someone that obviously won't be playing shortstop if he stays with the New York Mets. Is someone that won't be playing third base because they got Brett Beatty and Vientos on lock there. Second base is really the only route in that infield that we could potentially see Mauricio in the near future. And maybe that's a route the Mets go down, but I don't think that they made their decision on Baez really much on him. The point I'm trying to make, however, is that Mauricio is someone that does have some more room to potentially stay on this roster and actually make an impact at some point in the next year or two. If the Mets do, however, continue to address this infield, if they do land a Chris Bryant or something along those lines, then I think that they do keep Jeff McNeil, then, they're in a little bit of a trickier spot for Mauricio, and that's why he may become a trade chip. But again, with Epler's lack of adamancy to part ways with top prospects, it's a very different look than what we're used to. So I don't really think Mauricio is going to get traded unless it's truly a deal that's worth it, right? I don't think it's going to happen as of now. If they're valuing the farm that the way that they are, I find that hard to believe. Cano contract really hurts it. It's not hurting us right now, so I wouldn't say it does. I think that there's a good chance that Cano isn't even on the Mets next year. I feel that adamant saying that. I think that there's a good chance that he is not going to be a part of the Mets. He's either going to be, his contract's going to be eaten, deferred, just buried, or he's somehow, some ways, parted with in some form or fashion. I don't necessarily know, but I do know that the Mets probably don't want Cano in their lineup. Probably don't even want him in the locker room that much, knowing, he's a two-time offender for PEDs and everything. I think that the Mets are going to try to avoid Robinson Cano being a part of them in the future, but we'll see on that. Again, that's a very fluent situation still. Larry, thank you so much for the $2 donation. Hyping the chat for Larry with the $2 dono. Thank you so much for that, my man. Really, really appreciate that. Team aged a lot this past week. They did, but again, it's perfectly fine if the Mets are aging as long as they aren't giving up prospect capital in doing so. No, it does not matter if they're getting older. They're in a win now stage. Jacob deGrom isn't getting any younger. You want to help that guy win. Mets are trying to go all in. They have made that known with Scherzer and all the other moves that they made, and they will continue to do so. They're focused on the now, and they're not hurting prospect capital. That's exactly what teams like the LA Dodgers have done year after year after year, making big free agent signings usually while building prospect capital by not parting with anyone or even potentially taking on contracts that aren't great in order to build that prospects more. So I love the route that the Mets are going down because they're getting talent that are in their prime that are aging correct, but they're not giving up anything of significance other than money. And, money's money. Steve Cohen has plenty of it. He's made that known, especially on shorter term deals like Scherzer. There's nothing to worry about. So I'm really intrigued with the route the Mets are going down. Should we get Bryant? Like I said, I would love KB on the Mets, but I perfectly understand if they don't prioritize him or if that, he ends up going somewhere else. We're going to see. I think I'll be surprised if we don't find out more information on KB today. I know there's been rumblings and some rumors going on with him. You're 51. You fit in with veteran signings. That's funny. You guys crack me up. Is it possible for a Seager Lindor trade? No. And that's not a route the Mets should ever consider. No. That would be so bad on the Mets' part. That would make zero sense. Lindor is the balanced player. Seager's a great hitter. Lindor, he's going to be fine offensively. And Lindor is a night and day better defender than Seager. It's not close. And that's not a slight on Seager. That's just a fact. One of the Mets, Familia's a free agent, so I just don't think Familia is going to return, is what I think. Which is good for the Mets, in my opinion. This is not the Wilpons Mets. Can everyone realize when we can get the best options and not the fourth or fifth best option anymore? Correct, exactly. I mean, making a statement with Max Scherzer definitely helps to do that. And again, if you guys are emphasizing more on Max Scherzer's age than anything else, you're just not paying attention, respectively. You're really not. Can we bring back Kaneman? Nelson Cruz. Nelly would be awesome as a DH. But I don't know what the Nelly Cruz market's going to look like. And I think the Mets are going to have a lot of DH options in-house potentially. So I don't think Cruz is likely. I would be in favor of him at DH. That'd be awesome. But I could see the Mets wanting someone that actually knows how to field still at the end of the day in the DH position. So that way they can be very versatile and kind of rotate who they put in that DH role. If the Mets do sign Bryant, would it make sense to trade our extra stars for Castillo? I don't think that our McGills and Petersons of the world, I don't think that'll be enough to land I think Castillo is really going to cost an arm and a leg. And I don't think the Mets are interested in going down that route, personally. I think that if the Mets are going to go down trade route for pitching, it'll be of people that are actually more in reasonable range, like Sean Manaea, like a Chris Bassett, like potentially even either a Sonny Gray. Those are the types that I think the Mets would go down trade-wise via pitching. I think Castillo is really a pipe dream, given his value, his contract status. And yeah, and you have to also keep in mind the Mets would have to outbid opposing clubs that want to go for Castillo. A lot of teams have been interested in him. Teams have better prospect capital and are willing to part ways with it for a frontline starter ace in Castillo. The Mets just don't have those assets, and the assets that they do have, they don't want to get rid of, and for good reason. Build that farm. Boyd, yes, the Mets, as we talked about yesterday, have been connected to Matthew Boyd, and I'll talk about that more in tonight's live stream a little bit more probably. Again, folks, like I said, we'll be going live again probably around 7 or 8 p.m. Eastern time. I'll get the stream set up right after this one. Won't be long on just all the latest news and rumors regarding the Mets. We'll break down further on like the Mets options, but just in general, what's happening around the league, what the feel is for the Mets on the tender deadline as well. If any breaking news happens before that I wasn't currently live for, I'll go live right away, of course, and we'll break that as it happens. Again, a lot of uncertainty, but this feels like a big day. I expect a lot of moves to happen, to transpire throughout the day. And I'm sure if you're watching this on replay, especially, you probably already know what happens, right? Regarding if it's with the Mets or with opposing clubs. And thank you so much for 300 likes, guys. Really appreciate that. Like I said, help us get a 500 likes for the goal here in the live stream, whether you watch it live or on replay. And again, help us get a 12K subs for the next short-term goal on WardyNYM if you guys are, in fact, enjoying the stream. This is a big day for us. We do have a lot of holes filled. Again, but remember, do not be under the impression that the Mets are going to fill all their holes before the lockout. They're not going to. I can promise you that. There's a good chance the Mets don't do much of anything today, other than figuring out who they're going to tender and non-tender. So keep that in mind. With the lockout literally here upon us this December, today's the last day of November, I don't see how the Mets would be in a position to address everything. They're not going to. They're going to be very active again whenever the lockout is done. I think they're going to pounce and take full advantage of that market, especially because you're probably looking at a market that's more shorter term and higher AEV. That's what the Mets are looking for. So I think that we're going to see a part 2 of the quote unquote free agent frenzy, big time for the Mets once everything is said and done, assuming that they don't do anything drastic today. But again, we will see what the coming hours unfold here. A Rodon contract, I'll talk about that more later. Rodon, I should say. I think Rodon, he wants as big of a contract as possible. I would love it I would be comfortable with the Mets if they got him out of 3 or at most 4-year deal, maybe an option on that deal. Anything past that, though, I would definitely be concerned, just knowing his health status. And again, I'll talk about that more as I did last night. I will on the stream going forward. What exactly arbitration means? Because, yes, I know Adam Duvall's in arbitration. Arbitration means you have an arbiter, right? So you have the player. This is Adam Duvall. Adam Duvall, who might add would be a fantastic pickup for the Mets, potentially off the bench if they would have room as an outfield option. Could hit you absolute bombs, and you can get very creative with him and how he could be Adam Duvall could be your DH. I'm not against Adam Duvall as well as like a sneaky pickup if he leaves the Braves, but arbitration means you have Adam Duvall. He wants a certain amount of money, right? And then you have the Braves. They want to give him a certain amount of money, and they're apart, just like the CBA agreement. Exactly why we're having the lockout is because they're not close on a deal. So let's say hypothetically Adam Duvall is looking for, an AAV, a contract of $8 million, right? This is hypothetical. I'm not saying this is accurate at all. Braves are looking for a deal in the $5.5 to $6 million range. An arbiter comes in, evaluates both cases, Adam Duvall's stance, the numbers, advocating as to why he's deserving of that dollar, and then you have the Braves, and they give their stance and share all their information as to why they believe that Duvall is not worth that and that he's worth what they're proposing. And then the arbiter will choose a side, and he's either going to benefit, he or she is going to benefit Duvall. Maybe Duvall's going to get what he's looking for. Maybe the Braves are going to get what they're looking for. But a lot of times it really lands in between a lot. So if, say, he's looking for 8, Braves are looking for 6, very well he can land at 7. So that is what arbitration is in a nutshell. Mets, I'm sure, will go to arbitration with at least one player. They did it with J.D. Davis last offseason, I think it was just over a couple $100,000. It was actually not a lot of money at all. And that further proved that JD I did not think would be here long term, because the Mets were stubborn enough to not even throw a couple more K at JD Davis. They won their case at JD. It went to arbitration. It wasn't a lot of money at all in comparison to what arbitration hearings normally can be. And the Mets won that case. So yeah, that's just further proof that I don't think JD is going to be on the Mets in 2022. But yeah, that's arbitration in case you aren't aware. You're one very happy Tigers fan. I'm happy for you too, Keith. I'm upset to see him go, but I hope you get the absolute best out of Javi. He's going to be electric. He's going to have a lot of fun for you guys. So definitely enjoy him. Sam, thank you so much for the $10 donation. Hype in the chat for Sam. You're the hardest working Mets YouTuber. Having said that, I'd like to see you be more critical of the Mets. Letting Javi walk was just cheap. Why not protect your investment in Lindor? Okay, see, I feel like I explained this in the stream already, but I'll reiterate. I really appreciate the donation, the kind words, and your support. So the point of me always being optimistic of things that I do, you have to understand, you have to take the fan side, you have to really evaluate what are all the reasons as to why the Mets parted with Javy Baez. And realistically, if the Mets didn't want to go long term for him, they feel that there's obvious risks with Baez coming back down to earth. That's probably their mindset here, and thinking that he's not going to be, what we saw during the short, towards the end of the year. Whatever those reasons are, you also have to realize how much of this is on the Mets versus Javi. This seems like this was more of a term issue and an opt-out thing. I don't think the Mets would be giving Javy Baez an opt-out after 2 years. I don't think that would happen at all. Nor do I think the Mets were in a position where they want to give him a 6-year deal. So I don't view this as cheap. I don't think Mets fans have any right to say the Mets are cheap. They have zero, especially after landing Max Scherzer. Talk about cheap. My goodness gracious. If we're talking about cheap, the Yankees are cheap in hindsight in comparison to what the Mets are doing this offseason. And that shows you how much things have completely turned. I know it's easy to think about the Wilpons era, but by God, we're so far behind that. We're so far past that, I should say. So no, I do not think that losing Baez was a cheap move. But again, if further information comes out and the Mets just didn't want to give him $15 million more on 6 years, then I think you could have a better argument for sure. But as of now, it doesn't look like the Mets want to go those 6 years. And that opt-out very well could have been an X factor in his landing spot too. So you got to keep these things in mind. And you also have to keep in mind what is next for the Mets on potential deals that they make. It's very easy to, react maybe irrationally to something without having answers yet, right? Once we get all those answers, I think you can have a better grasp on things. But I think there's already enough on the forefront to indicate that there's reasons as to why the Mets did not bring back Baez, and there's reasons as to why Baez didn't come back to the Mets. So that's my viewpoint. You can wholeheartedly disagree all you want, but that's where I'm standing with, because I think it makes oodles amount of sense. Appreciate the donation, no less so. Really, really appreciate you, Sam. Thank you. Fred with the $5 donation. Escobar telling my cousin David Peralta. Oh, okay. He's telling your cousin. Okay. That's pretty dope. Fred, if your cousin's David Peralta, that's pretty. Let's look up David Peralta's stats. Just for the fun of it. Thank you so much for the donation. Really, really appreciate that. Let's look up David Peralta, and then we're gonna get close to wrapping up this stream. Not yet, but soon. Oh, and one more thing too, guys. Please, please, please do not look at losing Javy Baez as, oh my God, they really were so Wilponsian of them that they gave up PCA at the trade deadline, a top 6 prospect for them, and now they didn't even keep Baez. You have to realize that wasn't during Epler's time as GM. That was during Zach Scott and Sandy Alderson's time running things, right? This is a different GM. He has a different outlook on things. He's giving you different insight, different approach. Now, I'm been in heavy favor of what he has done so far. So that's all I really have to say on that matter. I do not think that we should slight the Mets at all for not bringing back Baez solely because of, oh my goodness, then it would look bad on the trade. No, it is what it is. That's over with. That's a different tenure. That's no different than comparing, the Wilpons times to the Cohen's times. They're different, right? Different guy in charge. He's the one, he doesn't care what Zach Scott was in favor of. He has his reasons for why he makes these decisions. Luis Castillo, like I said, I don't see happening. He would be fantastic in this rotation, but I cannot emphasize enough how much he would cost an arm and a leg. David Peralta. Peralta's 34. Okay. Yeah, Peralta is a left fielder and a DH. What numbers did he have in 2021? He had actually decent on base guy. 325 in 2021, a career 342 on base, 259 average, 402 slugging. Definitely not superior defensively versus other options. Had a sub 100 WRC plus and had himself 8 home runs, 63 RBIs. Peralta would be strictly someone coming off the bench. So nothing personal, your cousin or anything. If that, I know Escobar and Peralta are close during their time with the Diamondbacks. Peralta would be fine off the bench, but by no means would the Mets even consider him should be a starter right now. No, that isn't happening. I mean, Chris Bryant's from Las Vegas, so a KB if he stays out west wouldn't be surprising in the slightest. But it doesn't look like he would be going to the Giants. So I know when you're talking out west, like the Mariners, if you're talking just other teams in general, the Blue Jays have been really in on him. The Phillies have been in on him. See, this is why we're going to talk about all the non-tender stuff that's happening, because there's some players that could get non-tender today that would be outrageous, absolutely outrageous, that the Mets could target from opposing teams. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into that more. But, folks, we're at the point in the live stream where we're going to just open this up to a normal Q&A. We're going to go for, I'd say we'll go for another 5 to 10 minutes or so, and then that's going to wrap up today's live stream. We'll be back probably live again at 7 or 8 p.m. Eastern time, as I mentioned, with all the latest news going on. I really just wanted today's discussion and emphasis to be on losing Javy Baez and what it means for the New York Mets addressing their infield going forward. And again, hopefully we get some further information later today. Crazy. I've streamed more than I have been doing anything else the past day and a half. It's actually ridiculous, but I've been enjoying every second of it. Crazy time. And I think having a deadline has been awfully fun too. I would not be opposed if the MLB implemented this, maybe even as part of the CBA, where going forward, we have a free agency deadline. I think that would be absolutely sick. So that way teams are forced to make deals by certain times. It's hecticness. It's like the trade deadline all over again. I really like that. I don't know about you guys. Let me know in the chat. Would you guys be in favor of a free agency deadline as a thing that happens every year? Without a lockout, just in general, that we have one. I think that would be pretty sick. Maybe you have a deadline that you have to sign players by, maybe just hypothetically, second week of January or, beginning of February, something along those lines. Let me hear what your thoughts are. Tony, thank you so much for the $5 donation. Hype in the chat to Tony. Baez for 6 years is way too long. We have a great group of young guys coming out the next 2 to 3 years. Exactly. Again, this is why I think the Mets went down the route that they did in part. They didn't want to go to 6 years. And I perfectly understand that if that's why they didn't want to go down that route. We'll just see how they continue to address the roster going forward. Tony, thank you so much for the $5 donation, my man. Is that Conforto in your PFP? You're probably going to have to change that soon if Mike leaves, but shout out my boy, Michael Conforto. I will always be a Michael Conforto lifer. A lot of you guys like the deadline aspect. Cool. I'm glad I'm not the only one. I like it too. I really do. What do you mean, what about trade deadline? That wouldn't make no sense. I mean, no. You would still have the trade deadline during the season. I'm just saying you would have a free agency deadline. You wouldn't have a deadline for trades in the offseason. You only have a deadline during the season for trades, but you have a free agency deadline in the offseason. That'd be really cool because it's proving to really make things exciting for the game, in my opinion. It's really appealing, and it forces teams to make decisions and either act rational or All right, we're back, folks. All right, that I think that's kind of an indication that we should wrap things up here in the stream. So I'll go on another minute or so, but that'll go on for maybe like I don't know, like couple more minutes, and then I'll wrap things up. I honestly think that transpired because of just how much I've streamed over the past day plus. My Wi-Fi just went out. I don't nothing that's literally all there is to know. So yeah, we'll go on for like another couple minutes, and then I'm gonna get out of here, and then we'll hopefully be back live around 7 or 8 tonight. So again, guys, if you've been enjoying the live stream though, to my still roughly 400 viewers in here, thank you guys for hanging tight. Make sure to continue smashing that like and subscribe button as always. Really appreciate the support. Consistent, always, guys. It always means the world to me. And help us get a 12K subs for the next short-term goal. Do you guys hear me? Everybody hear me? Everybody fine? Hope you guys should hear me. I know that there's some background noise going on, but you guys should hear me. Check Tim Ryder tweet. Okay, I will do that. Shout out to Tim. Tim does a good job. Okay, awesome. All right, folks. You know what? That's gonna wrap things up for the stream. My apologies on the issue I had with the Wi-Fi. But like I said, we're gonna be back live. Probably, I'd say probably around 7 right now. If things feel like they're picking up time wise, then in regards to trades and free agent signings, then I'll move before then. Mets in agreement with Jake Diekman. Oh, are you serious? Is this the mark? Is this cap or is this real? Hold on. Is that Mark? Are the Mets in agreement with Jake Diekman, or did someone just make that up? Nah, I think that's cap. Yeah, it's cap. Someone made a fake Mark account, bruh. Hate to see it. I do think that the Mets will be in agreement with some people today. I don't know who. And we're going to find out soon, though. But like I said, folks, we're going to get out of here now. So I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Stay tuned. Keep your notifications on. We'll be live a couple hours from now. If you're watching this live or on replay, then you know that as well. Big live stream coming tonight. I'm hoping to get some news out. That would be awesome, too. So, again, make sure to continue smashing that like and subscribe on. If you guys have been enjoying the content as always. And, yeah, stay tuned. Big live stream coming tonight. Especially if a lot of news are happening, we might go on really long. I'm not sure yet, but I have a feeling that this will be a crazy night, given the fact that it's not just the tender deadline, but it is also, in fact, the cutoff really for signings because they need to get those physicals in, and the lockout starts in December. So, yeah, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you so much, folks. Have a great rest of your day. I'll hopefully see you guys in a couple hours. Peace out. Let's go Mets, baby. Let's see what's next for these Amazings.